Hey guys, it's David with Oklahoma Ham Radio. Just wanted to show the finished product. Before we start, if you wouldn't mind, please like and subscribe. It helps people find this content. I'm going to start by saying that what I did is overkill for this. It's not like you have to do all of this for your current VHF UHF setup, which is all I've got right now. I am trying to get a different radio, the ICOM 7300, and with that in mind, I built this antenna in the plans of eventually putting up a big IR from Stepper. So keeping that in mind, there's a lot of things that I did to prepare for that. So let's start back at the shack and work our way out. So coming out of the shack, I've got ground going to a plate right here. That is a circuit board that's copper plated. On the inside there's another one. This is a stainless steel bolt going through, and that stainless steel bolt connects to the other side. Here's the coax. The coax is making connection to this plate on the inside and outside, and this cable is my rotator cable. So this is a number 6 bare copper wire and some LMR 400. I come over to this ground plate. These little posts I found at let's see, Home Depot. They work great for clamping down on that copper wire. Over here, the coax feeds into a lightning arrestor. The lightning arrestor did not have a ground post to mount it, so I took a strap and bolted it onto this post and tied it into this post. Coming off of this plate, I'm going down to a ground post. I'll talk about the ground for a little bit. So the ground runs this way. There's 2 posts going that direction. I'm going to pay a electrician to tie into the house ground because I can't find it. I have a pretty good idea of where it is. I'm going to have to, I don't know, I just want to make sure. But then from this post going all the way over every 8 foot is another ground rod that's driven into the ground. 8 feet apart, 8 foot ground rods. I put this conduit in place, and this string is a feed line, which is pretty important, so that you can pull other cables through. And when you pull those cables through, you just tie another feed line on, or another pull string, and yeah, should be able to fish through here. Now, not all of these joints are glued, and I did that so that I could, if I couldn't feed a line through, I could take pieces off and feed it through more effectively. So I put this conduit in here to protect the cables because my yard man kept hitting my cables with the weed eater. So here's another ground post. You can barely see it sticking up. Maybe right there you can see the top of it, maybe. That ground line feeds outside of the conduit, and you can see I still need to put some more dirt down for the conduit. Right about here it gets to ground level, so up over here I'm going to leave it above ground level, and then when it goes through the actual backyard it's buried, so feeding cable through it becomes almost impossible. Over here is where it comes up. You see the pull string. I've got the pull string tied off to the pole just to keep it from getting damaged. That's my rotator cable and my coax coming out, LMR 400. The LMR 400 I do have coiled together there to try to block some RFI. I used a 2-inch PVC to wrap that. I probably need to just leave the 2-inch PVC in there. But over here on the base, I poured, let's see, I put a 4-foot aluminum pole that's 2-inch diameter into the ground. And in my video, you know, I show burning out the stump that was here previously. But I put that pole in the ground, I concreted it down at the bottom, and you know, we'll go into that some more in the video. There's my ground post by the pole that eventually I'll tie into with the ground plate. But then the fiberglass mask is slid into that pole. So that is pretty solid. It's not going to move. Over here for guy wire stakes, I put in rebar and concreted it in and bent it over so the guy stakes will be plenty strong enough to hold the mast. The just going to go up the antenna here. So as you go up, come over to this side and go up the antenna here now, and as I go up, you can see it's guyed up. Oh, let's see, that's about 12 foot high and then 16 foot high, right underneath the rotator. There is a diplexer that's wrapped up with tape there. That tape is the not the same, well, there's two different types of waterproofing tape. That is the more solid of the two that I've found. Going up to the Yaesu, let's see, that's a 450 rotator, and then on up to the antenna on the top. So it's a cubical quad antenna. Again, Oklahoma gets really strong winds from time to time, and I was taking that mast down whenever winds got over about 25 miles an hour. I didn't have strong enough guy stakes. I didn't have, you know, the base wasn't really setting in or on anything other than the ground. It was a very temporary setup, so I wanted something more permanent to use now, but also eventually that big IR is going to be mounted to that post, and I'll have ground radials spread out all around my yard here. But I didn't want to do something now that I would not be able to use later as I grow in the hobby. I really wanted to start working toward the end goal and be able to use what I have now. I'll probably put that big IR in around around February, and I'll you know, definitely record putting it up and all that. That big IR is 30 foot. Right now what I've got's right at about 20 foot tall. But when bad winds come along in Oklahoma, you know, 50 plus mile an hour winds, I'm not going to worry about the antenna anymore. So it is there now, and I'll be able to use it even when winds are much stronger. So anyway, that was the goal of this weekend, trying to get this antenna more permanently mounted. It's been laying in the yard for 2 weeks due to winds, and I really just wanted to get it done. So that's where I'm at, and the rest of this video will show progress if you want to stick around and watch it. Thanks, guys. 73. As I mentioned, I had a stump in the backyard. There was a tree there about, I don't know, a couple of years back, and I have neglected completing the removal of that stump. I was previously just putting my antenna on the ground where that stump was, that open area, but I wanted to get the rest of that stump out so that I could do ground radials around without that stump interfering. So I took 2 bags of charcoal and put it in there, and let Mother Nature or fire do the work. Here I'm digging down to start putting guy stakes in, and while that fire was going, I was able to work on other things. So that was one of the guy stakes I just put in the ground. They were 2 foot long guy stakes, and I basically concreted about 1.5 foot of that guy stake in place. So I did that. There I'm getting ready to mix the concrete, and I use an attachment on a drill to mix that concrete together. There's probably 20 to 25 pounds of concrete in each one of those holes, and one of the things that's important to remember is, clean your tools as soon as you use them so that you don't end up with leftover concrete hardened on those tools. But the rest of this portion was just putting, watching the fire, making sure that it didn't catch any grass on fire, and making sure that those charcoals were right up against the stump that I was trying to burn out. And then I show right here what one of those guy stakes looks like after it's in the ground. I did bend the rebar at the top before I put it in, pushed it down into the ground so it would be held, and then filled that hole with concrete. I did that, worked on that, I guess it was Thursday afternoon, and got all of those completed. So I'm going to skip ahead just a little bit here. This is coming up as my father-in-law, who is living with us right now, came out to check on the progress. So let me show you what I got done tonight. This is the 2nd. So my plan is the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, and the 5th to work on this. So as you can see, the antenna's over there. I think I'm going to add 4 foot to that, and we'll see. The stump is almost gone. This used to be actually it was 2 trees that were growing kind of together for quite some time, but the stump's almost gone. I will do the rest of it with that hatchet over there. I do have my posts concreted in, or at least 3 of the 4. The other one's got the hole dug over there, but really can't see it. Some concrete for some other stuff I'm going to be working on, and there's the ground rods that I'm going to put in. I'm going to continue from where I left off at the last video. Basically from here I'm going to continue every 8 foot over to where the fire pit thing is right now, where that stump is, after I clean it out. And that should give me ground rods every 8 feet all the way back to the shack. So I'm pretty worn out for today. I will see you in the morning. Hey, it's David. I'm out here working again on the antenna. I'm going to give you an update on the burn from last night. So I've got everything except for that big stump out of here. I'm going to light that on fire and see if I can burn a little more out. Let me move out of the way so you can see it. The rest of it's done as far as burning out. Then I've put these rebar stakes in. They're 2 foot long. Basically what I'm replacing is this, which is a 3D printed screw. It looks like it held up okay, but I was never comfortable leaving it in the higher winds. I'm going to build this out with concrete and such, is the plan once that stump's out of the way. And yeah, be able to have a platform for an antenna to sit on. Alright, so we got this chopped down thanks to my son, who came over and finished chopping it out because I was done. So the next thing we're going to do is start trenching for some wiring, specifically the ground wire, and we'll tie all these in together and knock all those down the rest of the way and get all that underground. So just an update as to where we are right now. I've got ground out to this point. So you can see I did some shallow trenches here. There's a ground stake there, or I say ground stake, it's an 8-foot ground rod. All of these are 8-foot ground rods, 8 foot apart, as I've mentioned before. Another one right here. I'll cover those up. What I'll probably do, I don't know that I'm going to trench this, maybe I need to, but what I'll probably do is get some yard stakes and just stake these down and let the grass grow over it. Here's the ground post that's by my shack. I'll also take some conduit and bury it for these lines to go through. Specifically, I'll probably run 2 coax lines over here to the antenna and decide what I'm going to do. So for an antenna later, I am concerned about grounding, and I'll show you why. Number one, I'm in a area that has a lot of houses, but I'll show you inside the shack real quick and show you what the concerns are. So this is inside the shack. So that's the window that things are going out of. The rotator, is going out on the right, and then the ground plate, I'll show you right here, is what the coax is getting rounded to and going out, along with the just common ground, or I say common ground outside the shack into the shack. I'm going to replace this thin wire with some 1-inch wire. Just haven't done that. But I've got, just in the closet alone, there's an amp, there's foot pedals, there's wires hanging like crazy that aren't hooked up, but there's a robot that I 3D printed that's going to Good Game for his STEM program. There's a printer, there's 2 3D printers, there's a PS3, there's a MacBook, there's wires connecting over to external hard drives. That's my work configuration with a laptop and a couple monitors and a TV. There's a TV over here. There's, you get over here and you got various things, right? So there's some backup batteries there. There's, another computer sitting here. All of those things have power supplies that are grounded out. Over here, you move that chair. Underneath here, there's some network gear. There's a box for DirecTV. There's, a lot of just stuff that's all plugged into common ground. And there's a whole lot of opportunity for interference or noise or whatever. Probably a lot more than most people's shacks, right? So inside of here, I've got the rotator, got a couple Yaesu, let's see, what is that? A FTM 3200 and an FTM 3207D. The reason for that is one's strictly VHF, one's strictly UHF. So one's the 2 meter band, one's the 70 centimeter band. Power supply's down here. There's a battery that I could switch over to very quickly if I need to. It's a LifePo, so it's a lithium iron phosphate battery. I've attached some of these marine grade bus bars, for lack of better terms, to the top of that. There's a spare fan back there for when the fan on that diamond power supply starts having issues. But there are a ton of wires just in this room alone. Oh yeah, humidifier over there, you know, a ceiling fan, you name it. There's a lot going on in this room by itself. So I'm gonna do some testing. A couple of things that I've ordered and are on the way. There's a Raspberry Pi 4 that I'm gonna run. I think it's called Rig Pi or one of the different distributions. I've got some concerns about that also. I don't know if you know, but 32-bit operating systems can only access a maximum of 4 gig. 64-bit operating systems can use terabytes of memory. They sell a Raspberry Pi 4 that has 8 gig of RAM. And that's the one that I bought because I wanted to do some experimentation on it. I don't know, you know, the distribution that's out there for Rig Pi and some of this other stuff, I'm sure is only a 32-bit operating system. So I'm sure, just from what I know about computers and being a C++ programmer and all that, having MIS experience out the wazoo, being involved in that field for 30 years, you're not going to access that additional 4 gig of RAM. So I'm trying to figure out, should I make a video about, you know, the additional cost of the 8 gig Raspberry Pi, and is it worth it right now? There is a 64-bit version of the operating systems. You know, Debian supports 64-bit. You can install Ubuntu on those boxes. They support 64-bit. But then you're getting away from the easy to install distribution that you know, HamPi or whatever it is, whatever the name is, I don't know. So I'll do some tests, I'll do some videos on that in the future. But anyway, back to grounding. I'm concerned about all of this stuff affecting, especially an HF rig, and raising that noise floor through the roof. I hopefully, if things go as they are right now, will get a ICOM 7300 here in the next week or so. I'll do a video on why I chose the ICOM 7300, and it really comes down to one thing. But I'll test it with what Bob Heil suggests, which is bypassing your house ground and just using the ground that's outside, see what that does to the noise floor. Other people say tie into your home ground, but then put ferrite beads and everything else to, you know, on all of your devices to reduce noise. That may very well be the way that I end up going, but I will record the results of each test, each ferrite bead that I put on. I'll record what the results are of that ferrite bead in my shack. Now, each person's shack is different. It's going to be hard for me to unplug everything in here because this is my office. This is where I work. So tracing down where those things, where any noise is going to be challenging. I've got network cables run all up in the attic, connecting to each and every room, which has some sort of computer device in each and every room. I have, I connect everything via wire. I may have to finally take that step and say, okay, we're doing nothing but Wi-Fi. I'll show you what I use for Wi-Fi. It's great. It works fantastic. I don't have any problem with it. I've got coverage into my backyard. I've got coverage into the garage. I've got coverage throughout all the bedrooms, living room, everything. So that is an option for me. But I'll show what I use for Wi-Fi and why I use it. Let's see what else. I may have to rip a bunch of network cabling out of the walls. I don't know. I don't want to do that because to me it's always better to be wired than trust Wi-Fi, especially when you're working. So it may be that I need ferrite beads on network connections, but I'll go through and show how I find all of that stuff and how I fix all of that stuff. I've got, let's see, 2 refrigerators and a freezer, only 1 microwave, mixers, blenders, TVs in every room. I don't know. I don't know what I'll find. So first step is to see what happens when I'm not on ground for the house. Tomorrow I'll probably focus on the mast, the base of the mast. That should give those anchors plenty of time to dry, the mast stakes, plenty of time, the concrete to dry in the holes. I'll probably work on that platform. And I'll record what I do, why I do it, how I do it, and we'll go from there. The fire should be done burning by that point in time, especially since we're supposed to have storms tonight. And I'll get that. Well, I broke my post hole diggers, so I need to go buy some new post hole diggers or rent the auger to do it. I'm seriously considering about renting the auger because I don't have the stamina anymore to go dig a 3-foot hole, whereas that auger should knock it out fairly quickly. So anyway, we'll get that aluminum post put in the ground and hopefully get the mast stood up and get me back on the air. So here I've dug the hole and put the post into the hole. I wanted to fill the bottom of the hole with concrete so that it also filled the pole when I slid it back down in there. The goal was to put concrete inside the pole along with the outside of the pole. That makes it more rigid at the bottom, but also it gives me a much higher platform to set the fiberglass mast on when I when I drop it inside of that pole. So I finished filling it up, the hole up, pushed the aluminum pole down into the concrete, and then take a level and start trying to make sure that that pole is as level as humanly possible. That's a pretty important part. I measure it about, I don't know, 4 or 5 times, make slight adjustments, just making sure it's straight. You know, if this piece isn't straight, anything you drop into it is not straight, and the future antenna that I mount to this pole is not straight. So I put some dirt over the concrete at this point so that there's a separate layer of concrete. So, and I'll go into why here in a little bit, but the goal is to have a bottom support for that pole, and then a support that's up higher. The other thing is you can use that dirt to help hold that pole while the concrete sets. But I didn't put a ton of dirt in, just enough to hold it. Make sure it's level. If you tap on that dirt, you can adjust the top location of the pole. They're in, you know, shifting the pole over to the left or right or whatever without making drastic adjustments. So you'll see right there that I finally am happy that it's level. So I let that concrete set for a couple of hours, and mixed up some more concrete now for another level of concrete. Now pour that in. Basically, I got the concrete up to the point that it was pretty much level with the ground at the top. I didn't try making anything pretty. It was basically maybe a 1/4 inch below ground level, maybe 1/2 inch. I just want something to hold the top of that pole separate from what's holding the bottom of that pole, and also give enough dirt and soil so that maybe some grass will grow up around the final platform that's built. So here I'm just smoothing it out some, and I go make some more concrete. That bucket wasn't huge, so I made multiple trips back and forth to fill up that hole. As you can see, I checked to make sure everything's still level. I say level, still square, still straight on multiple sides. And then I fill in dirt on the top of it next, just to, again, give grass something to grow on. Alright, so what I've got now is that aluminum pole in the ground. I've got 2 different levels of concrete. So there's one level that goes like the first 1.5 feet or so down in the hole. Then there's dirt. Then there's another wider level at the top. And I do that, number one, to conserve concrete, but number two, it gives two different points, distinct points that are holding that pole, one higher than the other. But also, you know, I wanted to have, for right now, this mast, you know, the fiberglass mast, to be able to slide down into that pole pretty low. So I did one level, put the pole in. That gives the base for this mast piece to sit on top of the that lower level of concrete. Then I filled in around the pole up higher, which then, you know, will be used. Whether I mount this mast to this pole directly or not, I don't know. I may fit it down inside of it for right now, but I should have quite a bit of support out of that pole. So right now, I'm gonna take a break, try not to get overheated too much, and think about what the next move is that I want to make. So I realized I better drive that last grounding rod into the ground there. So you'll see it beside the post. Next thing I did was form this box that I will use to pour concrete into, make a nice square platform. I don't know if I want it on that side of the grounding rod or not. I'll probably do it right there. That's more centered. What that'll do is give me a base, so I get the concrete poured in there to set other antenna bases on and strap it to this pole if I want to, and it also just finishes out the look of the base of the antenna. I may actually turn it this way so it's more aligned with the backyard. That's probably what I'll do right there. So I'll get to mixing some concrete and pour it in there. All right, so to mix the concrete, that's what I've got, and it works for a little while, and then the Ryobi overheats and it shuts down, so I end up having to do the last part of it with that shovel. But if I, you know, had a whole lot of lithium ion batteries charged, I would probably just use that Ryobi and let it cool off. But here is what I've got right now. Amazing that there used to be a tree there. Oh, a couple of years ago we cut it off because it was going over and hanging over the edge of the house. So I gotta let that dry, and then I'll fill in dirt, you know, around it and everything. I just don't want to bump it while that concrete's drying today. Probably let it dry overnight and then get the antenna stood up tomorrow. I'm debating on whether I tie into that post or whether I drop this antenna into that post and take that base plate and mount it down on that post. That would probably be the best way to do it for stability. And hopefully I'm not having to take this antenna down again. On the 3D printed parts, those rings, they've still done pretty well. I mean, they haven't warped or anything. I 3D print using ABS, as I've mentioned in another video. But the reason I do that is ABS does not block radio waves. So I was trying to get this entire mask set up to where I had as little interference as humanly possible from anything. You know, of course, that rotator on top could give some, but you know, an aluminum pole standing up in the air may give some also. But anyway, back to 3D printing. I 3D print things in ABS. It withstands the heat outside better than PLA. It also, you know, is not water soluble like PLA, so it stands up outside a lot better. The it does take some practice to print with ABS. Get your printer tuned in pretty well. The reason that is ABS likes to lift off the print bed as you're printing if you don't have environmental conditions set properly for ABS. So you really need a heat bed. You need which heats the base that you're printing on, keeps it hot enough. Then you need in my opinion, I use the Adhesion Sheets. They seem to work really well for me. I've tried slurry, I've tried all kinds of things. A glass print bed is very nice, and then you can put that adhesion sheet right on top of the glass and then hold that glass down onto your heat bed with clips, or there's various ways to do it depending on the printer. The only thing you need to watch out for is as the printer prints, hitting those clips and knocking those clips off. But you know, most things that you're going to print are not huge. The other thing is you can print a multi-part. I don't have one out here, but I'll show you when I do my video on 3D printing. You can print a multi-part piece, right? So a piece that's too big to print on your print bed, you can cut that into, say, 4 pieces and put it together very easily. Now, the cool thing about ABS is it's acetone soluble, and when you put that acetone on there, it actually bonds the pieces stronger than what the 3D print is itself. So I also strongly suggest an application called Simplified 3D. Everybody I've told to get that starts off by saying, no, I'll just use CUDA or something else. Simplify 3D will make the process much more stable and print quicker, and you know, just it's a great piece of software. I've been using it for probably 5+ years and never had a problem with it. I've used it on Linux, I've used it on Mac, and I've used it on Windows, and all 3 work great. So anyway, little plug for those guys. They don't sponsor me, they don't do anything for me other than help me print great prints very easily. Let's see, what else? I still need to get that PVC in the ground, and I need to let the concrete dry. One thing that I think is important, and I'll show it when I do it, is I think it's important to come up, you know, maybe at an angle and then up, over and then back down. That way when rain hits, it's not going down into your pipe and feeding all the way back, where you're trying to keep your lines nice and clean and neat and all that good stuff. Keep them protected. So I'll show what I'm going to do there. Basically, I'm making a upside down J for these lines to feed into and then feed down the line. I am going to leave a couple of these pieces above the ground on the side of the house so that I can pull them apart when needed and feed line a little easier. But anyway, I'm also debating on whether or not I drill some holes in the bottom of the PVC so that if water did get into the PVC pipe, it could drain out the bottom. All right, so I'm gonna take a break for a little bit, but I'm gonna show you what I got done so far. So this PVC, I've got it going over to there. I've got it trenched. I'm gonna run the cable through that PVC, and over here probably leave it above ground. I don't see the sense in burying it right up against the house, so just checked here to make sure of what it looks like in the ground. Looks like it'll work fine. The one thing I need to do is run a feed line through here, basically a pull string. It's a trick that networking guys use. Basically, they run some of this string through that tubing, conduit, whatever you want to call it. In my case, it's just PVC. And what they do is leave that string in there so they can tie onto something and pull it through in the future. So I'm going to get that string run and then disconnect these cables here, see if I can feed them through without any problem. I may have to do one at a time. One of the other tricks they do is every time they pull a pull string, they tie a pull string on so that they've always got a pull string in the line or in the conduit. Or some people run multiple pull strings. The only problem with that is you can accidentally pull the pull string through if a cable gets caught on it or anything like that. So anyway, that's my next thing. I'm taking a break for a little while. That trench was not very fun. The dirt, the soil on top is very hard, so breaking through it was difficult, but I'll record after I get that cable pulled through. Then this is the PVC going back. I need to get some more dirt to fill that in. Here's one of those grounding posts right here. I went ahead and left this above ground. I don't think it's gonna matter. There's concrete right along the base of this house, so obviously digging that is pretty difficult, but anyway, the wires are running inside of there. Wires being the coax and the actually it's LMR 400, and also the wire for the rotator. And the ground keeps hitting post every 8 feet. Ground posts coming back to here, and actually that continues on for 2 more ground posts going back that way. Here's the plate that's on the side of the house. I added these. I picked them up from Home Depot. They work great. Here's an extra one just in case I need it. Again, I mentioned this in a previous video, but this lightning arrestor did not have a ground post on the bottom, so I went ahead and just grounded using this braided cable. It's attached right here on this screw, comes over to this post, or this mount, and then that goes down to the ground that's outside the shack. All of this feeds into this post. Probably pull this through a little tighter, but I also have the feed line that is attached, so I can pull more. Actually, it's called a pull rope, but anyway, that's feeding through, so I can pull more cables later. Just need to cut it off and tie it somewhere. Let's see, that's going into the shack right now. I did a video on these. It's a stainless steel bolt, number 6 solid copper wire. This you know, is the coax LMR 400 going into the shack. This is the rotator cable. Let's see what else. So that's what's changed, or what I got done this weekend so far. It is July 4th weekend, so I've had a little bit of time to work on things. So after that concrete cures and I bust that wood out, I'll go ahead and stand the antenna up and go from there. Cal's got a show coming on in, I don't know, about 2 hours, so I'm gonna wrap it up here for the day. So coming out of the shack, I've got ground going to a plate right here. That is a circuit board that's copper plated. On the inside there's another one. This is a stainless steel bolt going through, and that stainless steel bolt connects to the other side. Here's the coax. The coax is making connection to this plate on the inside and outside, and this cable is my rotator cable. So this is a number 6 bare copper wire and some LMR 400. I come over to this ground plate. These little posts I found at let's see, Home Depot. They work great for clamping down on that copper wire. Over here, the coax feeds into a lightning arrestor. The lightning arrestor did not have a ground post to mount it, so I took a strap and bolted it onto this post and tied it into this post. Coming off of this plate, I'm going down to a ground post. I'll talk about the ground for a little bit. So the ground runs this way. There's 2 posts going that direction. I'm going to pay a electrician to tie into the house ground because I can't find it. I have a pretty good idea of where it is. I'm going to have to, I don't know, I just want to make sure. But then from this post going all the way over every 8 foot is another ground rod that's driven into the ground. 8 feet apart, 8 foot ground rods. I put this conduit in place, and this string is a feed line, which is pretty important, so that you can pull other cables through. And when you pull those cables through, you just tie another feed line on, or another pull string, and yeah, should be able to fish through here. Now, not all of these joints are glued, and I did that so that I could, if I couldn't feed a line through, I could take pieces off and feed it through more effectively. So I put this conduit in here to protect the cables because my yard man kept hitting my cables with the weed eater. So here's another ground post. You can barely see it sticking up. Maybe right there you can see the top of it, maybe. That ground line feeds outside of the conduit, and you can see I still need to put some more dirt down for the conduit. Right about here it gets to ground level, so up over here I'm going to leave it above ground level, and then when it goes through the actual backyard it's buried, so feeding cable through it becomes almost impossible. Over here is where it comes up. You see the pull string. I've got the pull string tied off to the pole just to keep it from getting damaged. That's my rotator cable and my coax coming out, LMR 400. The LMR 400 I do have coiled together there to try to block some RFI. I used a 2-inch PVC to wrap that. I probably need to just leave the 2-inch PVC in there. But over here on the base, I poured, let's see, I put a 4-foot aluminum pole that's 2-inch diameter into the ground. There's my ground post by the pole that eventually I'll tie into with the ground plate. But then the fiberglass mask is slid into that pole, so that is pretty solid. It's not going to move. Over here for guy wire stakes, I put in rebar and concreted it in and bent it over so the guy stakes will be plenty strong enough. And go up the antenna here now, and as I go up, you can see it's guyed up. Oh, let's see, that's about 12 foot high and then 16 foot high. Right underneath the rotator there is a diplexer that's wrapped up with tape there. That tape is the Not the same, well, there's two different types of waterproofing tape. That is the more solid of the two that I've found. Going up to the Yaesu, let's see, that's a 450 rotator, and then on up to the antenna on the top. So it's a cubical quad antenna. Again, Oklahoma gets really strong winds from time to time, and I was taking that mast down whenever winds got over about 25 miles an hour. I didn't have strong enough guy stakes. I didn't have, the base wasn't really setting in or on anything other than the ground. It was a very temporary setup, so I wanted something more permanent to use now, but also eventually that big IR is going to be mounted to that post, and I'll have ground radials spread out all around my yard here. But I didn't want to do something now that I would not be able to use later as I grow in the hobby. I really wanted to start working toward the end goal and be able to use what I have now. I'll probably put that big IR in around around February, and I'll definitely record putting it up and all that. That big IR is 30 foot. Right now what I've got's right at about 20 foot tall. But when bad winds come along in Oklahoma, 50 plus mile an hour winds, I'm not going to worry about the antenna anymore. So it is there now, and I'll be able to use it even when winds are much stronger. So anyway, that was the goal of this weekend, trying to get this antenna more permanently mounted. It's been laying in the yard for 2 weeks due to winds, and I really just wanted to get it done.